Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood with Hegwood Law Group, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning and welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood. And today our very special guest is Diana Saufley. And she's with Diana Saufley, Realtor. And so she's been doing this a while, right?
Yes, about 9 years.
Oh, okay, good. And so, well, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you. And then today we're going to be talking about houses, healthcare, heirs, and planning for the future. And so, most of that subject, yes, I enjoy immensely. And so every day. So, so a lot of seniors, when they get ready to, when they start, retirement age, and as they start to decline, the subject always comes up of what do we do with the house? How can we make sure that, where can I go? What, how do I get rid of my stuff? All that kind of stuff. So, but one of the questions, always comes into play is how can I find out how much my home would sell for, if, kind of guesstimating for the future. So you have an idea on, what to expect and to prepare for finances and how much, things are going to cost. And so how do you help them with that?
Well, a lot of people think that their appraisal is what their house would sell for, and it's not. It's what they're taxed on, but it is not what it would sell for. So I can do what's called a CMA. We use acronyms all the time, but a CMA is a comparative market analysis. So it's actually going in and pulling homes that have sold usually in the same neighborhood, like an appraiser would do within the last 6 months, that are of similar style, size, and condition, because some have been updated. So I actually have to look at pictures of houses that have sold to see which ones have got updates and which ones don't, so that I can weed out specific homes to come up with some idea of what they would be able to get, to use that money to move on to their next plan.
That sounds a little more complicated than you want to do in a day.
It is.
So when someone gets ready to sell the house, or if they're buying a house, what do you talk to them about when there's not a will in place?
Well, I'm a registered nurse as well as a realtor, and I can tell you I've been a case manager in a hospital, and I would say probably about 95% of the people that came into the hospital, some of them will tell me they have a will, which is fine when they're gone, but they don't have a lot of their other documents, which is an attorney. I know you wish they would, and I do too. But sometimes I will have a spouse that will pass, and the other one says, well, I'm not going to bother probating because I'm going to stay in the house, and then they pass. So then we have to track down wills and heirship affidavits and death certificates and everything else. So if they don't have a will, I usually end up having to do exactly what I said. I usually have to involve an attorney, and we have to find out if there were wills and track down the heirs, find out, if how many there are and where they are. And everybody assumes they know all the heirs, but you never know. So usually I have to engage an attorney to do some investigative work. Whereas if they had a will and everything is spelled out and it gets probated, it's much, much, much easier.
So we're finding that a lot more people, especially at the height of the housing boom, that people were trying to sell houses, but they hadn't done anything. So lots of affidavits of heirship, some court proceedings, depending on, who was going to, inherit. And so, but you talked earlier, that the spouse passed, so they weren't going to, really weren't going to do anything. And then they pass, and so, and we tell clients all the time, you got to probate when each one of them passes, because
Right.
That doesn't automatically go to you. It has to be done by a process. And a lot of people think because we live in a community property state that it's automatic, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So,
And now with blended families, it can get a lot more complicated.
Oh, most definitely. So we tell clients, when you've got a blended family, you should do trust planning and never do will-based planning, because it's so easy to disinherit children.
Yes,
And so,
exactly.
I see a lot of those kids in my office wondering how how mom or dad, managed to do that. And I said, they got some bad advice.
Right.
The attorney didn't talk to them about what they should be doing. And so let's kind of dig a little deeper. And so let me ask you, kind of throw you a curveball here.
Okay.
So you have that surviving spouse that's, it's in the house and they're ready to downsize. And they're talking to you about selling. What kind of things do you recommend that they think about during that time?
Well, I always go in and assess the home itself, because we've got to make it as sellable as possible. A lot of decluttering has to happen. Well, we all need to do that, but a lot of decluttering has to happen, but also minimal upgrades. Sometimes I have sellers that want to start doing all kinds of upgrades, but you're not going to get that money back. I mean, if you put 10,000 in, you're not going to get 10,000 back. Some things are worth doing, some things are not worth doing. So I like to go in and advise them on that, as far as what's going to bring value to the price, because any money you spend is going to be money spent. You're not going to necessarily get that back, even if it's something like painting. I almost encourage everybody to paint if they haven't. But there are some things that could be really expensive. For instance, if they go in and start making changes that they like, that doesn't mean the buyer's going to like it. And you may find that on the curb, the week after you sell it, you're going to see all that carpet you just put in on the curb because they don't want carpet. So I like to go in and give them a very realistic approach of where they should spend money and where they shouldn't spend money to get it ready. But I will be honest, if it's a situation where there's been a recent death of a spouse, even sometimes if it's not that recent, my case management experience comes in handy, because there's usually still a lot of emotion tied to a house. Well, every house, but definitely in that situation. So getting rid of some of those things is even more emotional. So it's very difficult. So I help them with that. I have had people just hand me the keys and say, here, get it sold. And I've had to do all that, get rid of all the stuff in the house, have repairmen come, clean things, paint things, replace things, whatever needs to be done. So I had an interior design business for 10 years too. So I'm able to help them stage the house. I do tell them to depersonalize. If they're going to stay there while it's being sold, any pictures of family, faith, things that would cause people to focus on who the seller is rather than what the home's got to offer, I like to have them remove all of those things.
So what kind of choices does someone have when they don't have a home anymore?
You mean like where they would want to move?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, there's always rentals, but in particular, working with the senior population, I have a lot of seniors that are moving into the 55 and older. There are neighborhoods that are 55 and older, so they would still own a home. And most of those communities, they have some steep fees, but in those fees, they take care of their yard. They paint their house every X number of years. They do a lot of services for the seniors, because a lot of reasons seniors don't want to stay in their houses, the maintenance, the yard, the house, the repairs, especially if they maybe are widower. Getting on ladders is not a good thing for a lot of people to do, but definitely not seniors. But there's 55 and older apartment communities that are like the Taj Mahal. They get better and better all the time. I go in them all the time and take tours, and I'm above 55, and I'm telling you, me and my neighbor and one of them, we were like, man, when can we move in? Because they have got, it's not like, a lot of people think it's going to be like a nursing home, and it's not at all. Matter of fact, most of them don't provide food. They don't provide any food. Some of them do, but most of them don't. But there are so many common spaces where people could go that you don't feel like you are in an apartment. You have got places where you can get spa, movies, places to play various games, have your own parties. They are so incredible, and they're gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm always looking for somebody that's going to cook and clean for me. So
exactly. Well, you can have those people come in, and actually, if you're living in a 55 and older apartment, if you needed some type of care, or if you just wanted maid service, anything like that, those people can still come service you whenever you're living in a 55 and older apartment complex. And the truth is, even in assisted living, they can still come and do service for you.
Yeah. So you seem to have a very diverse
I do.
career path. So let's talk about some things that I think are important that are going to kind of intertwine with your different careers. And so who do you recommend that someone informs about their health and maybe assets or financial plans. In your experience, who do you think the best people are?
Well, I find that usually the eldest daughter is who ends up. I happen to be the youngest daughter, but and I am kind of the one. Well, not for both of my parents. My parents are divorced many, many, many years ago. But I do have some clients who don't want to involve their families. They don't want their families to know what their plans are because they're afraid of bickering or them being told what to do. But I would find somebody that's very trusted that is going to carry out, the plan for what you want and don't want, as far as when you do have health issues, your advance directives, what treatments do you want and not want when you become unable to make those decisions for yourself or speak to make those known. And then who's going to handle the finances while you're incapacitated and pay your bills and not take advantage, because sometimes that, as we all know, you hear it in the news all the time, that unfortunately happens frequently. So you've got to make it sure it's someone that wants to do it, is capable of doing it, and is going to honor your wishes.
Yeah, we find that, we tell everybody elder abuse is on the rise, scams are on the rise as you get older. And so, even my ex-husband got the call that they had my oldest daughter, so then everybody's calling, trying to find her. And she wasn't answering the phone because she was busy or she's doing something. And I'm texting her, it's an emergency. I need you to call me now, so she
My
calls.
mother got a call.
What?
She's 90. My mom's 90, and she got a call from my son that he was in jail.
Mhm.
But what was really scary about it, because they said that there was an attorney, they had a phone number for the attorney. They didn't ask for money. I called the attorney, talked to him about it, told me the whole story, the accident he was in, who was involved, who he hit, when it happened, that he had broken his nose. I mean, you would not believe the depth of the deception. And it finally took me texting my son's roommate saying, oh my gosh, is he okay? And how is the lady that he hit? And my son called me immediately and said, "What are you talking about?" None of it was true. None of
Yeah.
it was true. But they knew my mom's phone number. They knew my son's name. I mean, my mother very much believed it. And of course, since she believed it, then I did. And I did call the attorney to try to figure out what was the situation. But then even talking to the attorney, supposed attorney, he didn't ask for any money there. I did not detect any deception at all. It was, and I'm hearing that is so much on the rise because, we're on social media. A lot can be determined about you.
Yeah, it's surprising how much information,
Yeah.
is out there about your family and who they are and things like that, so I tell clients all the time, if you get the call that your child is in jail, you just tell whoever called to call the bail bondsman, because there's nothing you can do. And that will, one of two things are going to occur. You're actually going to hear from your child at some point in time, or they're going to call the bail bondsman if it's true, so.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's crazy how good they are, and so,
That's true.
so you have to be really careful, because I had a lady that had the same problem, that, she got that phone call, but she knew her son was in jail. She knew that already, and she thought they were going to help get him out. And
Oh,
that wasn't the case, so they were evidently calling family members of people in jail running that scam. So it's not surprising, at all. And so tell us really quick, about, all. It seems like you do a little bit more than most realtors. And so, does everybody need one, and why would they want one, and all those other kind of good things?
I honestly, as many clients as I've had, it's a little bit shocking to me, although until becoming a realtor, I didn't know what all realtors do. It seems like we show up and put a box on the door and put a sign in the yard and wait for a house to be sold. But um, there is so much work that goes on long before that can happen. And part of it is tracking down, okay, I've had someone call me and want me to sell a house. And I'm like, I'm checking, who owns it, and the names don't match. And I said, is this your parents? Have they passed away? And he actually said, that's my understanding. I said, Okay, it was a very weird call. I'll tell you right now, it's a very weird call. So I have to do my due diligence to figure out who I'm talking to, because, if I just jump in with both feet, this may not be someone that even has the rights to be selling this property. So I have to do a lot of research on my part to even figure out who can sell the house. And on both sides, though, buyers, we have to get them pre-approved. I mean, they've got, if they're going to be getting lending, and even if they're going to be using cash, we literally today, more than ever, have people showing up with suitcases of money. And that is a concern for all parties involved. Where did the money come from? And, is it drug money and things like that? So I tell people all the time that this buying, selling process is a courtship, and we're just hoping we're going to have a marriage, because during the usual about 30 days of a contract, the title company is doing their due diligence on the property, the contract, and all of that, making sure that the property is, free and clear of liens and things like that. The other side is checking out the person who's going to be buying to make sure that they've got the wherewithal to be able to purchase the property. So behind the scenes, both realtors, the buying agent, a lot of people don't understand that there needs to be two realtors in a transaction, because as a listing agent, I'm representing the seller. My vested interest, my fiduciary responsibility is to my seller to make sure that I help them get the highest and best price that I can for the house. Whereas the buyer's agent, the person representing the buyer, they're doing the same thing. They're doing it for the buyer. So I can't very well advise a buyer, and shouldn't advise a buyer on a property when I'm representing the seller. And there are unscrupulous realtors out there and people that will try to represent both sides. But the law says that if we do that, then we can't give advice. We can do the paperwork, but we can't advise either side, because we can't separate ourselves from what we know about the other side. So we do that. So we are guiding, both sides are guiding the clients down the path of the financial part, the legal part, and not that we're attorneys, but the title companies have attorneys, and they're looking at, they have underwriters, and the underwriters got to be satisfied with everything on the property side to give it the green light and say, we're okay with everything. But they're also looking at, who the buyer is and making sure we're getting an adequate lender that's willing to make the transaction happen. And then we get inspectors involved. Buyers have to get the house inspected, and after it gets inspected, then we have to negotiate, are there going to be repairs that are going to be done, or is the seller going to maybe offer some cash to offset that, or not at all. I mean, sometimes it gets inspected and both parties agree that it's fine. And then there has to be an appraisal. So the appraisal is going to, honestly, the rubber kind of hits the road with the appraisal, because no matter what the seller wants to sell the house for, no matter what the buyer wants to buy the house for, if they're getting lending, if they're getting a loan, the appraisal is what the lender is concerned about, because they're going to loan a certain percentage of what the appraisal price comes in at. So, and that's usually done later in the process. So, sometimes deals fall apart when parties can't agree, when we get down towards the end and the appraisal has come in high or low, and both parties can't agree that they're going to somehow work that out. They usually do. I would say most of the time we work it out. I haven't had, in 9 years, I haven't had very many deals at all that have fallen apart. We usually manage to work it out.
Yeah, mine was all pre-negotiated as far as what would happen depending on how the appraisal fell. All pre-negotiated. I was very surprised about that, because that's the first time that's happened to me. Well, the last time I was new, but so I was like, oh, pre-negotiated. That's pretty good.
Well, and there is a form now. They've come out with a form. It was always available for FHA and VA, but now they have a form for conventional loans as well. And there are several options on the form, but basically the buyer can let the seller know, look, should the appraisal come in at this amount, or whatever, they can fill in they can choose 1, 2, or 3, and let the seller know, if something should happen, this is going to be my posture. I'm going to move forward no matter what. I'm going to want it to at least come to this amount, or I'm not going to buy it unless it's this amount. So that's a relatively new form. I think it's been around for 2 or 3 years, which has given some assurances on both sides, really, in conventional. It was always something that was available on FHA and VA, but it was not available in conventional, and it is now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Diana, if somebody wants to find you because they need a realtor, how do they do that?
Well, my email is on the screen, dsoftly@yahoo.com, and my last name does not sound like it is spelled. So I always tell everybody to just speak softly. That's the way you say my name. And my phone number is 281-705-5091. And my website is just my name, dianasaufley.com. And I'm with the Houston Association of Realtors, of course, the Texas Realtor TREC, HARTAR, all the organizations. That's where I'm certified through. And in Houston, native Houstonian, been here my whole life. But I just feel like with all of my caring professions, I do feel like that's what I've done, caring for people. And when I've designed their homes and when I cared for them as a nurse, and now helping them make plans for their current and future living arrangements. But I will tell you, every house is an emotional sell, and a lot of the skills I've had as a nurse and a case manager do come in handy because every home tells stories. Every home holds memories, and selling and buying them on both sides is very emotional.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.